The United Nations say high food prices in 2022 led to a crisis of affordability that has pushed millions more people into hunger. UN correspondent Margaret Besheer talks to experts about the situation and what to expect in 2023.
349 million. That's the number of people on the planet who don't know where they'll get their next meal, according to the UN's World Food Program. And the number is growing. The agency says by the end of this year it will have fed a record 150 million of the most vulnerable. Experts say a combination of factors is driving food insecurity. The COVID-19 pandemic, conflicts, climate shocks, including historic floods and droughts, energy prices, and Russia's February 24th invasion of Ukraine.
But even before the war in Ukraine, the food price were at a 10-year high earlier this year. Fuel was at a 7-year high. We were already talking about inflation. So when this war came on Ukraine, it magnified everything.
In part because Ukraine and Russia are breadbaskets for dozens of countries.
Ukraine and Russia are important players in production, world wheat production. Their market shares of about 4 and 8%. And much bigger share in world exports. So if you don't have freely flowing grain from the Black Sea Basin, then you're going to have very big problems outside.
The war also drove energy prices up on fears of supply disruptions and sanctions on Russia's oil and gas exports. Fertilizer prices are up 250% from 2019, according to the UN. Half of global food production relies on fertilizer, and small farmers who cannot afford enough have seen their harvests decline.
Right now, with all that is happening, we are looking at essentially a shortfall of about 66 million tons of staple foods because of shortage of or unaffordability of fertilizer. I'm talking about crops like wheat, corn, rice. Now, that 66 million tons of food, that is enough to feed 3.6 billion people for 1 month.
Looking ahead to 2023, food security experts are watching fertilizer availability and weather.
In the case of wheat and corn, it will depend a lot on what happens with the weather. Argentina, for example, right now has some issues of weather which could be affecting the harvest, and that's something that we are observing very closely. The same could be happening in the U.S.
The uninterrupted flow of grain and fertilizer from Russia and Ukraine under the Black Sea grain deal will remain critical to global food security. Rice is the primary staple food for half the planet, and experts are closely watching production.
In case of rice, we are already observing a reduction in the supply because of lower planting. But rice, luckily, we have a lot of stocks because the previous years were pretty good.
Economists say the strong U.S. dollar is increasing monetary pressures on dozens of poorer countries who are import dependent and need debt relief.
If you're a poor country, if you're highly indebted, if you happen to import your food, your fuel, or your fertilizer, you are in trouble.
Amid the rise in food insecurity, the UN recently named its first famine prevention and response coordinator to lead its system-wide response. Margaret Besheer, VOA News, the United Nations.